If you need to add hundreds or even thousands of words to your essay, this video is for you because I'll give you 4 effective ways to increase your word count. And let's get straight to them. Way number 1, add an explanation. In our writing, we often assume that the reader is familiar with all the concepts that we discuss in our writing. But what if we could find a concept or term that many people might be unfamiliar with? That's your opportunity to add an explanation. And let's do an example. Here's a potentially unfamiliar term or concept in the sentence. John became a victim of the ostrich effect when he chose to deny that his family did not share his outlook on the situation. Alright, what could be a potentially unfamiliar term or concept here? Well, it's the ostrich effect. Well, what exactly is the ostrich effect? Well, you may know what it is. Now, I may know what it is. I better know what it is if I'm writing about it. But not everyone probably will. So maybe this is an opportunity to provide an explanation. So let's add an explanation of that concept. The ostrich effect refers to a peculiar behavior of this tropical bird in dangerous or critical situations. When facing danger, an ostrich buries its head in the sand. This way it prevents itself from seeing what is happening around it. Unfortunately, while this helps relieve anxiety, this is not an effective strategy to deal with the actual threat. And we have just added a nice little paragraph. And not only have we added a good quality paragraph, but we have also improved the reader's experience because now the reader gets an explanation of a potentially unfamiliar subject. Use this technique to define rare or technical terms, to describe a potentially unfamiliar process, or to add details to explain a situation. In adding an explanation, you can use some of these questions. What is this? How does this work? Why is this effective? What does it enable? So just ask the question in your head, ask yourself the question, and write down the answer. And that's going to be an explanation. Number 2, use the counterargument technique. And it's a 3-step process. Step 1, pick a spot in your paper where one of the authors you've used as a source could disagree with a point, or where anybody could really disagree with one of your points there. Let's look at an example. People don't change. Let's say one of the minor supporting points in your essay is that people don't change. Now, you don't want to use the counterargument technique to counter-argue your main point. Don't use it with your main point. Use it with some of your supporting points, or some of the minor points in your essay, anywhere in the body of the essay. Definitely not in the thesis statement. But let's say that one of your statements that you're making in this essay is that people don't change. Okay, here's our step 2. Let's challenge the statement. That's what you need to do. You need to challenge that statement and say something like, some authors disagree with this assumption. They claim that, let's say for example, they claim that people in fact do indeed change sometimes. Or you can say, some may argue that this is not true because sometimes people actually do change. So this is step 2. This is where you present the actual argument against your own point. But then you answer that challenge in step 3. And you say, however, these authors that are saying that, hey, you know what, after all, people do indeed change sometimes, they are mistaken because, and just provide whatever the reasons are. Here's an example of a complete counterargument. Let's say our point is that people don't change. Okay, so now we want to add 2 juicy paragraphs. Here's the first one. Well, some authors seem to disagree with this view and claim that people can change under certain circumstances. This would be the argument against our argument. And now we answer that other person's argument. And this is our complete counterargument. And we say, however, these authors are mistaken because modern psychology really does present abundant evidence that human psychology loves the status quo, meaning that people really don't change. See, in steps 2 and 3 here, in these 2 new paragraphs that we just wrote, these 2 are sentences, but we can actually turn them into paragraphs and we can write as much or as little as is necessary. And this is going to depend on how big your essay is supposed to be, but this is a great way to add content to your essay. Way number 3, add examples. Let's pick up with John and the ostrich effect from the previous example. John became a victim of the ostrich effect when he chose to deny that his family did not share his outlook on the situation. Okay, now we're already familiar with this one, and we have already added an explanation. So we already added a nice little paragraph to explain the ostrich effect. But now let's add an example of John being a victim of this effect. For the past 3 weeks, John's wife Liz has tried to get him to recognize that their daughter had been receiving poor grades in school. See, that's a problem. But faced with the challenges of his new business, John just kept brushing the topic aside. One day, Liz became so angry with her husband that she simply stopped talking to him. That got his attention. You see, we just added a nice little juicy paragraph that in fact is an example. It's an example of John's behavior, of John's exhibiting this ostrich effect. And just look at the last sentence. That got his attention. You see, that is an invitation that kind of opens the door to write even more. So again, when writing an example, you can write as much or as little as you need in your essay, depending on how many words you need. And finally, add a whole section. You will use this technique when you need to add a lot of words or pages. Let's say, for example, you have 10 pages and you need to add 3 or 4. This technique will work for you. Let's say you're writing an essay on human psychology and you have 3 sections, right? You're using the power of 3 the way I teach, and you have 3 main sections about emotions, one about intellect, and one about decision making. All 3 of these are parts of human psychology. Of course, each of these main sections will have 3 subsections, let's say, for example. Now, and let's say that you've written about 10 pages. So each of the main sections will contain about 3 pages, about 1 page per subsection. So here's what you do. You add a whole section. You add a whole main section. So now you're still talking about human psychology. Your main point is still exactly the same, but you add one more supporting point. And we just added one about the ego. So now we have 4 supporting points about emotions, the intellect, the decision making, and about the ego. And that's going to be another 3 pages with a page per subsection. You see how this works? All right. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in an upcoming video.